Buonasera and welcome to the second session of this meeting about the memory of the Shoah at the crossroad of generations. I only thank you once again to be here, students, colleagues, professors from our universities, from Tor Vergata, from the Biblicum. And let me just introduce the president of the Collegium Maximum, Father Pino Di Lucio. He will give a welcome, and after him we will have His Excellency, the Ambassador Yaron Seidman. Thank you so much, Pino.
Buonasera a tutti, eccellenze, gentili ospiti, cari amici. Con profonda emozione do il benvenuto. Voi avete già cominciato di per sé, quindi è un benvenuto.
Now, with great happiness, I would like to give you a warm welcome. I know that you were welcomed already this morning and that the coming in was very, very nice. So welcome to this day, preserving memory of the Shoah at the crossroads of generations. That was organized jointly together with the Embassy of Israel with the Holy See, and it was organized by Cardinal Bea Center with the high patronage of the Dicastery of Culture and Education. So our first and most heartfelt thanks goes to the Ambassador of Israel with the Holy See. He said, "Are you new in?" And he said, "Yes, I am a new ambassador. I was appointed 8 months ago." "Then you are not new." That's how I replied. So welcome, Your Excellency, and thank you for your generous and very fruitful cooperation that made possible this initiative. Sincere thanks to all of the institutions that shared this pathway leading to this day, the University of Rome, Tor Vergata, and more in particular, the Master in the Studies on Shoah and the Memory, the Yad Vashem, and the Washington Holocaust Museum, the Apostolic Archive of the Vatican, and the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. To them, our gratefulness for the incredible constance with which they promote research and memory. And then many thanks to Dr. Claudio Procaccia, the director of the Department of the Assets, the Cultural Assets of the Jewish community in Rome, for his very incredible contribution. And many thanks to Professor Gargiulo as well, director of the Cardinal Bea Center within the Gregorian University, and to Dr. Evelina Totti, who is moving her first steps within the Cardinal Bea Center. So this is a day that takes place on a highly symbolic date, that is the 80th anniversary after the end of World War II in Europe. This is a celebration and an anniversary which allows us to recall the memory of the renewed peace and the collective memory of never forgetting the tragedy that preceded that peace. The Shoah was one of the deepest injuries ever inflicted to the human conscience. And today, whilst the direct witnesses are ever more rare, it becomes urgent and ever more necessary to find new ways to preserve its memory, to pass it on to next generations and educate them. On the occasion of the Memory Day, the Remembrance Day, Pope Francis was telling us that the seeds of anti-Semitism should never be ever allowed to take root in the heart of man. By recalling the suffering and the tears that were shed by the victims of the Shoah, the horror of the extermination of millions of Jewish people shall never be forgotten nor denied, said Pope Francis. And as Pope Francis said, we are all involved in uprooting the tragedy of anti-Semitism, and this is together with all forms of persecution, religious persecution. And in the messages of the Pope, we have intertwined memories, one of which is the memory that should never, never be erased, the one of those who were the witnesses of horror. And we should also then educate the future generations who are probably unaware of the many things that happen in the course of history, such as anti-racism and anti-Semitism. A central place is to be given to the new generation, which are here well represented, because they are the ones who will be the custodians of the memory, while being aware that the memory of events should never be forgotten. And this is another point upon which Pope Francis was insistent. And this is where we have to step in with our common activities, the ones that are led in common. And Pope Francis in 2019, on the occasion of the encounter with the Cardinal Bea Center, while addressing the Jewish professor teaching at the Cardinal Bea Center, told them that they were a presence which was taken as a novelty. Here we have a professor who teaches in the Cardinal Bea Center, and the Pope said that this is already a message, because the fact that Jewish professors teach in a Catholic university, such as the Gregorian University, is already a new fact, because this leads to the authentic dialogue, and this is a knowledge that comes from within, and the dialogue has to be taken forward. It has to be taken up two voices, because this is worth many more discourses. And those are words that are more than topical today. They point at a path which is made of a real dialogue, which is taking place outside of the classrooms. It turns into a testimony, into a common pathway. And the Cardinal Center Bea and the Gregorian University are renewing in all this their commitment in the loyalty to this mission, and that was once again reiterated by many popes, such as our late Pope Francis. And we undertake to make all efforts to take in our hearts the memory and teaching other people dialogue and respect. And this afternoon, let's hope that it's going to be a moment of deep reflection and new education, spiritual education, which will allow us to be the custodians of all this and to transmit with great responsibility the memory which is also representing future roots. Now, going back to the dialogue, which is in the framework of the common teachings, and as you probably know, day after tomorrow, I'm leaving for Jerusalem, and I'm attending a conference. But then, since there have been many rockets hitting Israel, the flights have been delayed. But let me say that I will be leaving, because otherwise they will be missing the Christian testimony coming from Rome. So I will be more than happy and grateful to go there and to attend the meeting, which is concerning the monotheist religions and prayer. So once again, thank you to all of you for your being here, for your presence, for your contribution, for this important common path. And I wish you a successful study day.
Thank you very much, Professor Di Lucci, President of Collegio Massimo. And thank you, Bea Center and Professor Gargiulio, who really, I want to say together, we worked and put this together, but he did much of the heavy lifting on this, and it is very commendable. It's great results. For those of you who have been to this morning session, I learned a great deal, and it enriched me, as I'm sure this afternoon session will as well. Let me start by really saying thank you to some of the key partners to this endeavor. Of course, the Bea Center, Yad Vashem, the U.S. National Holocaust Museum, Tor Vergata University, and the patronage of our event, the Dicastery of Education and Culture. The name of the seminar is Preservation of Memory of the Holocaust at the crossroad of generations we are at. And we are at a crossroads, of course, because, as you rightfully said, we are at a time where survivors with first-hand accounts of the Shoah are scarce, and in a matter of a few years will unfortunately not be around. And we are in need of devising new methods, techniques, innovative, out-of-the-box thinking of how to preserve Holocaust and promote Holocaust memory in the future, in a reality without survivors. And this puts a very high responsibility and obligation on us, because as we move further away from the Shoah in terms of the time, as one generation after another, it behooves us to make sure that future generations are not removed from the Holocaust, from the Shoah, from its important lessons and from the responsibilities that it places upon us as individuals and societies. And that challenge is basically at the core of this seminar. This is what this seminar is designed to address, and to help us navigate through it are some of the top leading researchers, experts, and practitioners in the field. As you so rightfully pointed out, this is a historically consequential day, 80 years to the day, to the end of World War II in Europe. And who knows, maybe in a few short minutes or half an hour or 2 hours, there will also be a new pope elected. To me, it's very significant that we are, and trust me, we didn't plan this in advance, but that this seminar on preserving the memory of the Holocaust is taking place exactly at the time when the new leader of the Catholic Church is being elected. And I truly hope that whoever is elected will will seize the responsibility and obligation of being very active in the area of combating anti-Semitism and preserving the memory of the Holocaust. I would like to close by reading a few passages from the Survivors' Declaration that I think will kind of set the stage for the next lectures that are upcoming. The Survivors' Declaration was first read by a Holocaust survivor, the late Tzvi Gil, 23 years ago at a Yad Vashem conference called The Legacy of Holocaust Survivors, the Moral and Ethical Implications for Humanity. And as Israel is this year the head of IRA, IRA standing for the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is a 35-member alliance devoted to preserving the memory of the Holocaust. It is very important to go back to that declaration, which we will also be happy to send via email to each and every one of you, with the purpose of signing it to reinforce its message. So let me just read a few short passages from the Declaration of Holocaust Survivor Tzvi Gil. The age of Holocaust survivors is drawing to a close. Before long, no one will be left to say, I was here, I saw, I remember what happened. Massive documentation shall remain, research, lessons, pictures, and film, and testimonies. This will be a new era, The dark inheritance of the Shoah that was so indelibly stamped in the survivors' souls and hearts will become a scarce, sacred mission incumbent upon humanity. We, the survivors, chose to rebuild our lives and to join the fight for the establishment of the State of Israel, to contribute to Israel's society and to humanity. The foundations of the State of Israel include not only the memory of 6 million of our people who were murdered, but also a crucial historical lesson of the Shoah, namely that the Holocaust must never happen again. We share a deep desire to transmit to future generations what we lived through and what we learned during that dark time, before we bid farewell to this life that showed us so much bitterness. In Jewish tradition, the commandment to remember is absolute. It encompasses more than the mere cognitive act of memory and must be rooted in moral commitment. Today, we, for whom the memory is burned in our hearts and on our flesh, gather to pass the torch to the next generation. We pass on to you as well the message that remembrance must lead to ethical action. This must be the foundation and the source of energy for building of a better world. The Shoah, which establishes the benchmark for absolute evil, is the universal heritage of all civilized persons. The lessons of the Shoah must become a cultural code for teaching human values, for democracy, human rights, and tolerance, and for countering racism and totalitarian ideologies. And it goes on and on and on, but I think these words send us a clear message and set the stage for our mission. And I wish us all, with that, a very successful and beneficial seminar. Toda Rabba. Thank you very much.
So I have the pleasure of moderating the session that we are about to start. How we will do this is I will introduce each speaker individually, but we will hold for questions only after all the papers are finished, just in the interest of time. So it is my pleasure to introduce Michele Sarfatti, who is the author of seminal works on Jews and anti-Semitic persecution in modern Italy. His groundbreaking study, The Jews in Mussolini's Italy, From Equality to Persecution, first published in 2006 and translated into several languages, drastically changed the way in which historians consider Mussolini's racial laws and the persecution of Jewish communities in Italy. Dr. Sarfatti has been coordinator of the activities from 1982 to 2002, and then director from 2002 to 2016 of the Fondazione Centro di Documentazione Ebraica Contemporanea, CDEC, in Milan. He is one of the founding editors of the e-journal Quest, Issues in Contemporary Jewish History. And from 1998 to 2001, he was a member of the Italian government Commission of Inquiry into Jewish Property in Italy during the period of persecution, the Anselmi Commission, that was from, and then from 2003 to 2008, he was a member of the Italian Government Commission for the Recovery of the Bibliographic Heritage of the Jewish Community of Rome, looted in 1943. He is now a scientific a member of the scientific committees of the National Museum of Italian Judaism and the Shoah, and in Ferrara, and of the Shoah Museum in Rome.
Molte grazie. Susan Brown Fleming.
Sit down here. Grazie mille, Susan Brown.
Many thanks, Susan Brown.
The last 4 minutes of my permanence on this place, please. Io sono uno storico. Per uno storico la Shoah non è il male.
I am a historian. For historians, the Shoah is not absolute evil, because in the history of men there is nothing absolute, and because the Shoah is inside history and was carried out by men and women, but mostly by men. The Shoah is not divine work, but human work, events to be studied and investigated and understood. Shoah is a word which is already present in biblical Hebrew with the meaning of catastrophe, destruction. Its adoption in European languages began following the uproar which was caused by the film called Shoah by Claude Lanzmann in 1985. I'd like to point out here that the spread of the word in Italy was also encouraged by its prompt adoption by the Holy See, decided by John Paul II as a form of respect towards victims. From the point of view of a historian, the words memory of the Shoah mean two separate things, even though they are connected. The individual memory of those who experienced the Shoah and survived, and the collective memory of that event, which civil society can develop and maintain and keep. The first type of memory, the individual, is held by all these people who are directly involved in the event: victims, persecutors, people who provided aid, or opponents, and people who didn't have played these roles but who had information on what was happening. The victims who have stayed alive chose individually whether, when, what, how, and to whom to tell their own experience and their survival. For each of these, the memory conveyed is only a part of the memory they held. Those belonging to the second and fourth category, persecutors and the people who were informed of the events, often have locked up the memory of those events inside them and only provided information which did not damage their participation in post-war life. Even when they were questioned in trials as defendants or as witnesses, they essentially made statements which were useful for their defense in trials or to maintain their social respectability in post-war years, and which were not very useful to understand the Shoah as it occurred. Many of them further assigned to other people, often of other nationalities, the responsibility of the events they were involved in. This behavior leads to the first of the problems in the memory of the Shoah I can discuss. Beyond the individual roles persecutors and informed people had, their failure to convey their memory publicly caused a reduction in the collective awareness of the seriousness of the Shoah. Furthermore, this conduct denied the victims who survived the social role they were entitled to that of being simply victims and to force them to replace the absences or the avoidance of other people's memory. So they were forced to become historians of themselves, and often the authorities, national civil authorities and local authorities, religious authorities, teachers, journalists, continued to assign them this task of being historians. There are some aspects of the persecution which are not mentioned or which are mentioned very little in the notes which the victims wrote on a daily basis in the journals of the time. I'm referring in particular to the Italian situation. One of these unmentioned aspects is the possibility of the killing of relatives, in particular small children or old parents. For example, Manuele Artom, partisan who was then arrested and killed, often uses the word death in his diary, which has been handed down to us. But when he's commenting the 30th of November 1943 decision of the Italian Social Republic, he did not use that word, and he wrote, "What will happen to my family? Maybe I will never see my father and mother again." He didn't use the word death. Another Italian Jew, Giulio Supino, who was in hiding in Florence with his wife and his daughter Manuela, who was 8 years old. On the day Florence was liberated, the 11th of August 1944, he wrote in his diary, "Manuela is safe." But in the 11 previous months in his diary, he'd never, ever indicated his fear that his daughter might be arrested and killed. The possibility of one's own death, and in particular one's weaker relatives, was a constant thought during these periods of hiding, but it was too difficult to write this in one's diary. I'll move to another point here. Human memory is a part of us as humans. It has its life. This is something we see in the re-emergence of memories after many years, or the intertwining of these memories with memories of the people who lived similar experiences. This is a situation which is well known to scholars. French historian Georges Valère gave the example of a Jew who'd been deported from Paris to Auschwitz in March 1942, who survived till liberation, and who in April 1945 had provided his witness. This victim referred many important things on Auschwitz, but he also said that his travel to Auschwitz took place on a cattle truck, whereas it has been shown that he was actually transported to the camp in a passenger carriage. This is something which has come out this morning on the problem of memory. Valère explained this as follows, and I'm quoting, "In 1945, after 3 years spent in the hell of the gas chambers of Birkenau, years in which this victim had definitely heard countless tales on catastrophic traveling catastrophic conditions in cattle trucks. He is, in his memory, a accidental replacement of what he'd actually lived with those stories took place. So we have to be careful of these things. But we also know as historians that in the specific case of the Shoah, individual memory is an irreplaceable and unique historical document. There are things which have happened which only the survivors can tell. I'm still thinking of the descriptions of the roll call which was made in Auschwitz, described by Nedofiano, and from him too in March 1991. I discovered what the people who were tasked with opening the gas chambers in Birkenau saw. I won't give you the details on what they saw, but there are no official descriptions of this, not even partial ones. There's only the memory of those who were there and who survived. And if I can make a comment on something which was said in the discussion this morning, I'd like to say that we know some things. We speak of Auschwitz because we know some things because there were survivors. As was already said, we know practically nothing of Treblinka, of Sobibor. We know nothing practically of the gathering in the woods where people were killed. I'm not sure what the I'm not sure what the title was in English. Every lightened thing. I was in Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec this summer in Treblinka. There are fragments of bone. Those are the testimonies which have remained. In addition to 2, 3, 4, at the most 6 narratives, and this is why we focus on Auschwitz, because we don't know, we can't say what happened elsewhere. I'm saying this because this is a real problem which we have as historians. The Jews killed in the Shoah were approximately 2/3 of those who lived in Europe at the time. None of them told how they were arrested and died. None of them gave us the 5 W's, who, what, when, why, and where. The testimony is something given by a living person, but reconstructing a historical event where people died also has to take this into account. History always concerns all the people involved, and a historical reconstruction is nourished by the testimony of the survivors, but it has to take into account all. Give you an example. I'll give you an example of something which happened in Kosovo in early 1942. Kosovo was a region in the state of Yugoslavia. After the invasion in April 1941, it was allocated to a large part to Albania, which was under Italian authority, and a small part to Serbia, which was occupied by Germany. When the Nazis began general extermination in Serbia, which was earlier than in Poland, a few hundred Jews escaped from Serbia and secretly entered this larger Albania, Greater Albania. The Germans asked the Italians to return the escapees, and the German police and the Italian police agreed that the Italians would hand over the Jews and the Germans would hand over some Kosovars, not Jews, but anti-Italian, who had sought refuge in Serbia. And the Carabinieri handed over 41 Jews, and no further information is known about them. They were probably killed in the camp in Belgrade. There is some news in the documents in Yad Vashem. There's no real direct news. The Italian police want to hand over the other 150 Jews. At this point, the Jews in the Pristina camp in Kosovo appealed to the Kosovo authorities, who then referred to the collaborationist government in Tirana, and they prohibited handing over these 150 Jews and ordered them to be transferred to the interior of Albania, where they remained alive through the subsequent German occupation. They were alive at the end of the war. They have 51 deaths and 150 survivors. More precise list to remain. We have 51 people who were not able to hand down the memory of what it means to escape the Germans, be arrested by the Italians, be handed over by the Italians to the Germans, and be killed by Germans. And 150 people who for 2.5 years lived in Albania under Italian occupation and then in Albania under German occupation. The latter obviously have the right and the duty to hand down the memory of their experience during the Shoah, and a historian of the Shoah has the duty to reconstruct the experience of these people. The last problem of the memory of the Shoah, I mean, there are countless things I could discuss, is a special form of that memory, photographs. Photographs are the historical memory of a moment, and sometimes of a moment in the past, and also a foundation of the construction of a present and future memory of that past, which tends to transform that moment into eternity. That is very important. So photographs are very delicate pieces of material, but our society is not ready to deal with memory delicately, and many things are dealt with hastily and rushed. There are some photographs which are taken by a German concerning the arrival in Auschwitz-Birkenau of a transport of Hungarian Jews in spring 1944. In one of these pictures, we see an elderly woman and 3 children who are seen from behind, walking along an empty track along which we can see barbed wire. According to the historians, these 4 are going towards the gas chambers, even if there's no the gas chamber that's not visible in the photograph. This photograph has now been enlarged, and it is displayed on a board in the camp in order to show where these 4 Jews went, and therefore all the other victims went. The historian Janina Stuk wrote a following commentary to that board, and I'll quote what she said. Those people, those 4, whoever they were, have been sentenced to walk that stretch forever. Having posted their image at Birkenau appears to be a final humiliation. They could not avoid being photographed at that time, and now they cannot avoid being seen by later generations. This book is entitled Photographers of the Holocaust, and she raises a question, and I agree that photograph, the memory of those Jews, should be published in a book, many books, but I feel inside myself, as well as she did, that they should not have been exposed to infinite public death. I'm just saying that this is what I thought looking at that board and reading these things. And I conclude by saying that this, as many others, is one of the many problems of the Shoah, towards which we are and will continue to be. And the best way to understand the Shoah and honor the memory of the Shoah, in my opinion, is to question ourselves on what this and all other individual aspects of this archipelago around the deaths of these 6 million people is. Thank you for listening to me, and thanks to the interpreters for their work.
Thank you so much. That was really thought-provoking, and I'm sorry. I will invite David Meyer to the podium. David Meyer everyone can hear me? It's good? Okay. Is an Israeli and French scholar and rabbi. He was ordained from the Leo Beck College Rabbinic Seminary in London. After finishing his degree in applied mathematics at the University of Paris 9, he obtained a master's degree from the École Here's French, and I won't be able to pronounce it correctly. What he said in Paris, and later a master's degree in Hebrew and Jewish studies with distinction. He holds a PhD in religious studies from the Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium, and he is currently a professor at the Cardinal Bea Center for Judaic Studies at the Pontifical Gregorian University, Rome, where he teaches classic rabbinic literature and contemporary Jewish. He's also an invited professor of Midrash at the University in Louvain and at the University di Pacifico in Lima, Peru, and also at the Pontifical University of Lima, where he teaches yearly seminars on Jewish and rabbinic ethics. He has written multiple books and academic articles on Midrash, post-Shoah theologies, and religious violence.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan, for the words of introduction. I'm very touched, I have said, to be here today to add my voice to the discussion we are having. It's a topic, I have to admit, which is quite emotional. It touches very clearly on my personal history. Now, the title I have chosen, you can see behind me, in a way, is a giveaway already. Unconsoled Memory. It is, for me, no less really than a cry from the heart, trying to advocate for a very particular kind of transmission of memory to the generation to come. Maybe it's a bit of a polemical idea. It's a memory that refuses the idea that one can be consoled for the Shoah. And in the time that is allocated to me today, I will try to make my case to give content to the kind of transmission that can shape what I consider should be an unconsoled memory. My argument for an unconsoled memory will be articulated around 3 moments, each being rooted in a specific rabbinic text, and I will share the text with you on the PowerPoint behind me. I will use this text as a springboard for my own reflection, what I call, for me, a textual catalyst. These texts are not just to help me think as a rabbi, but they also help me to feel maybe less lonely, as if I was accompanied by old friends, old textual friends that themselves have passed the test of transmission from generation to generation. So let me proceed with directly the first rabbinic text, the first moment of my presentation and the argument. The text that you have here is a commentary on, Midrashi commentary on the book of Lamentation, Lamentation 2:2, and you can read the text. It's about a verse that says, the Lord demolished and had no compassion for the abodes of Jacob. I'll give you a context for this particular text that we will read. In the Midrashic narrative, two rabbis, two sages, are recalling the catastrophe that has befallen the Jewish people, exile and destruction. And it appears that these two scholars, these two sages, are wandering around the ruins, and each time they arrive at a particular site, they think and they recall the history of what happened to that site. So let's read the text. It starts with Rabbi Yochanan. On each particular place he arrived, he would expound 60 aspects of the verse that I've quoted, the Lord demolished and had no compassion. He had 60 things to say. And his companion, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, would expound only 24 aspects of that particular verse. And the Midrash therefore asks the question, is it not that Rabbi Yochanan was therefore superior to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi? And it seems, as we read the text, that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi has found his master, someone with a better memory than him. 24 verses 60. The problem is, Rabbi Yochanan comes a generation later. And that is what makes the text difficult. So let's read, how can we understand this? How can we understand that someone who comes a generation later has a better memory of the catastrophe? This is how the Midrash ends. Rather, since Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was close to the destruction of the temple, each time he would remember, he would explain, he would cry, and then he would be consoled. So is it really about time and memory? The Midrash, and I suppose us together with the Midrash, should not be so sure. It is more, in a dramatic way, I suppose, about time and emotion. With the passing of generations, memory runs the risk of becoming technical. It's not the knowledge of the event that risk vanishing, but rather the emotions that the event triggers. And so as the Shoah recedes into the past, into history, and as document will eventually replace the broken voices and the tears of the witnesses, will the emotion also recede into the past, as the Midrash suggests? But can documents, as this is what will be left for us, can document be emotional? Or to phrase the question slightly differently, can emotions be embedded into documents so that documents will turn to be the medium from which emotions can emerge? And what kind of documents can function as an emotional time capsule? So let me turn to the second moment of my presentation. And I want to address this very specific question. What document do we need to generate and transmit emotion across the generation? Now, in truth, there are two aspects to the question I just asked, one of format and one of content. Let me start briefly with some words and some perspective about the format, the literary format of such a document. This is where I want to turn to the second rabbinic text. It is again a short midrashic text, this time from Leviticus Rabbah, and it's about the start of the book of Leviticus. In the beginning of Leviticus, Vayikra el Moshe, and the Eternal spoke to Moses, Vaydaber Adonai elav me'oel mohed lemor, and the Eternal spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. And the rabbinic tradition is rather puzzled by this verse, because did not God already spoke at length to Moses on Mount Sinai? So what is here the function and the reference to the tent of meeting, where God again speaks to Moses on the tent of meeting? This is how the Midrash answers. Rabbi Eleazar said, although the Torah was given as a fence for Israel from Sinai, They, the children of Israel, were punished for transgressing Torah only after it was repeated in the tent of meeting. My translation is a little bit controversial, but it's very literally. Af al pi shenitna Torah seyag leIsrael miSinai, even though Torah was given as a protective measure for Israel from Sinai. Torah as a fence, as a protective measure against the experience of revelation. Now, the rabbinic tradition has to be astonished because the rabbinic reader is accustomed to read that the commandments within Judaism themselves are a fence around Torah. This is what we expect. But it is now the Torah that is a fence against the revelation of Sinai. The children of Israel, we are told, are not liable for transgression until everything has been repeated and transformed and reshaped in the tent of meeting. And the Midrash reiterates the point to make it stronger by bringing a mashal, an analogy. This is analogous to a writ of decree that was written and sealed, and it entered the province. The residents of the province will not be punished on its account until it is explained to them in the province public forum. The Torah, as we see, is compared to the document that is read and explained in public. It is not the decree as it originated. It is not the decree as it was written and sealed. The Torah is therefore not Sinai. The Torah is not what Moses carried down the mountain. The Torah rather is the document that emerged from the tent of meeting after it was explained, reshaped, transformed into a literary document. So why is this important, and why such a detour by this rabbinic text? Because one is tempted by a very powerful analogy, a midrash on the midrash, a parable on the parable. An allegory that has been made many times before by Elie Wiesel and others, which aims to compare Sinai with Auschwitz, and consequently to compare Torah with a document that would emerge from Auschwitz. The Midrash cited invites us to consider Torah as a protective document, protecting us from the experience of Sinai, from the direct encounter with revelation. And similarly, the comparison now asks us to look for a document as powerful as Torah, as protective as Torah, because we do need to be protected from the experience of Auschwitz, but also a Torah-like document charged with emotion, intensity, and authenticity. In short, we are asked maybe to look for Torah as a template for the document that can navigate the tides of changing generation as Auschwitz recedes into the past. And so we need to interrogate Torah, its essence as a document, as a successful document that across the generation transmit emotions and not just knowledge. Now, Torah, as we've understood it from the Midrash I quoted, is not revelation. It is not Sinai. It is at least twice removed from Sinai. Levinas, who was very aware of that distance and that reality, thought of Torah not as the text that reveals the presence of God, but in a much more subtle way, as the text that reveals the trace of God's absence. Not the trace of God's presence, the trace of God's absence. And Derrida, famously commenting on Levinas, said, "How can one conceive of absence?" he asked. And he answered in a bit of a cryptic way. He says, "The written has to bear a trace of the absence." And it is from this conception of Torah as testifying in its midst to the reality of an absence that I would like to proceed by now connecting Torah as a document to a Torah-like document about the Shoah that could ensure the transmission we are looking for. Now, such a document does exist, and I will rephrase that in a more careful way. One such a document imbued with that potentiality exists at least as an experiment. And I emphasize that point, at least as an experiment. I'm talking here about a text titled the Megillat HaShoah, the Shoah Scroll. Okay, here it is, the Shoah Scroll. The Shoah Scroll is a 6-chapter narrative that was written in biblical Hebrew. It narrates, in a way, the Shoah. It's very controversial, and maybe it borders with heresy. But that document exists, at least as an experiment, as an attempt to create a proper textual medium, a Torah-like text, that could help us in our task of transmission. The idea of the text was to create for the passing generation a ritual reading, just like we have for Purim with the Megillat Esther, or for the 9th of Av with the Book of Lamentation, a reading that would root memory with emotion into a narrative. But the text has its own history. It was written, as you can see, by Avigdor Shinan, Professor Avigdor Shinan, in Israel in 2002. But something happened to the text, something with which I was involved, and this is why I want to talk about it. Because it was called Megillat HaShoah, the Shoah Scroll, I thought, when the text was published, that a Shoah Scroll cannot be a little booklet. It has to be a proper scroll. So I had the idea to work with a scribe, with a sofer, to transform that booklet into a proper scroll. And this is here the written text as it was in the booklet, and how it becomes here in the scroll that actually was. Now, the changing nature of the document, transforming the booklet into a scroll, is not about aesthetic. It's not about an attempt at canonization of that document. The change was made so that absence and loss could be embedded in its midst. So that just like Torah is the trace of God's absence, the Megillat HaShoah could be a testimony in its own texture to the trace of our loss, thus giving content to the words of Derrida. This was done in many different ways, and I will just share one way with you today. Together with the scribe, we decided to transform some words of the original Hebrew from Avigdor Shinan into what is known in Hebrew as a ktiv chaser, a scriptio defectiva, a writing of the word without one particular letter, and in particular the letter Vav, which is a vowel consonant, thus creating in the text a textual loss. This is how it looks. Those are 3 words that appear in the written text in the booklet. And this is how they appear in the documents of the scroll. And as you can see, each time there is the letter Vav that is missing in the text. The idea being that such an absence would be a way to root in the texture of the text the sentiment of a loss, of an irreplaceable loss, those of the Jews murdered in the Shoah, a sort of an unconsoled texture within the document. Now, let me now conclude by turning to the last moment of the talk, to the last rabbinic text that I intended to use to reflect on the question that we're addressing today. The last rabbinic text will address the issue of the need for an unconsoled memory, not just in the texture, as I've just done, but in the content of that text. Now, we're going to start very far away from the topic. And this will require a bit of imagination. The text I'm about to share with you is an halachic legal text. It's coming from the Talmud tractate Brachot 50b, and it's about a broken bed. So we are very, very far away from what we are talking about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain very quickly that text in its own context, and I will then try to draw an analogy in order to advocate for an unconsoled memory. So let's enter the ritual of the bed. Let's imagine that we have a bed made out of various parts. We have the legs, the headboards, the mattress, the rail, and so on. And let's imagine that that bed is in a state of ritual impurity. Maybe there's a snake that got into the bed, maybe there's blood into the bed, who knows. Imagine now that some parts of that bed have gone missing. Someone came into the house and stole the headboard or the legs of the bed. Then what remains of the bed, we are told, is pure and not susceptible to become impure. Why? Simply because the bed that is not a complete bed cannot be impure, because it's not a finished object. That's a legal rule. Now imagine again, next step, that the bed is now reconstructed because whoever stole something from the bed came back and put it back, and the original bed is suddenly reconstructed. What we are told is that from now on, the reconstructed bed, which is the same as the bed before, is pure, and it becomes susceptible to impurity, despite the impurity of the bed that we started with. Meaning that the reconstructed bed is unrelated to the original bed, even though it looks the same, as if it was now a new entity. There is a rupture in the identity of the bed at the time the bed is repaired and reconstructed. There is a before and an after, and these are unrelated. Let's leave the bed aside and weave the thread of the analogy. We have here the bed that we can think of as the community of Israel, made of its various parts throughout history. We have the reparation of the bed, the wholeness of the bed, and that reparation becomes evocative of consolation. Things are repaired, things are made whole again. The reparation, in a surprising way, repairing the rupture, is rupturing the identity of the bed. The wound of the Shoah would be repaired in that analogy, but reparation, repairing the rupture, would mean rupturing the identity of the people. Why rupturing the identity? Because an appeased Jewish people today would not be faithful to the depth of the wound of the Shoah. And so it seems that we have to choose. We have to choose between either being consoled, reparation, wholeness, or identity continuity. We have to choose between these two, but we cannot have both. And this is where the drama really is. If we repair the rupture, we are rupturing the identity. And so, I believe, memory must remain unconsoled. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. Really fascinating to listen to, and very beautiful and poetic. I'm so pleased to welcome to the podium Nina Valbousquet. She is a historian based in Rome and a scholar of both Catholic and Jewish history. She is the author of 2 monographs, Catholics and Anti-Semites, the Transnational Network of Monsignor Benigni, and also of Lukewarm Souls, the Vatican, and the Holocaust. She is the co-editor of the volume The Global Pontificate of Pius XII, War and Genocide, Reconstruction and Change, published last year with Simon Unger Alvi. And she's the editor of a special issue of the review of the history of the Shoah on the Pius XII archives and the Holocaust. She's also the scientific curator of the exhibition on the churches and the Holocaust at the Shoah Memorial in Paris that was displayed from 2022 to 2023. She's the co-organizer of the French Historical Institute's 5-year research program and seminar on the Pius XII archives from 2022 to 2026. And she's been a research fellow at the French Historical Institute from 2019 to 2023, working on the Vatican archives. She is currently a fellow of the Rothschild Foundation Hanadiv Fellowship in European Jewish Studies at the University of Manchester, and in 2024, she was awarded a Yad Vashem Fellowship in Holocaust Research in Jerusalem. She's also a research associate of the French Research Center in Jerusalem. She's currently a member of the research program funded by the Max Weber Stiftung, coordinated by Simon Unger-Alvi, The Global Papacy of Pius XII, Catholicism in a Divided World.
As you all know, I think, there was the white smoke, so there was the white smoke. But I would ask you to continue. I know it's not easy, but I would say that the conference, also for respect for our two speakers. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for those who are staying. I'm going to try to be spectacular as the smoke. Thank you, Susan, for the kind presentation, and thank you to Massimo and Evelina for their organization. I want to thank also the Bear Center and the Israeli ambassador for this important joint initiative. So I'm going to talk about the new Vatican, the recently opened Vatican archives, and what they can bring for us for the history and memory of the Holocaust. So as you probably know, in March 2020, after a decision of Pope Francis, the Vatican declassified the archives of the pontificate of Pius XII, so the period 1939 to 1958. And you probably noticed that there was a lot of media attention to, if that works, to finding a smoking gun. And as Italian historian Daniele Menozzi pointed out, the archives opening instantly revive old controversies. Memory controversies about the silence of the Vatican and the Pope in the face of Nazi atrocities in general during the war, and the Shoah in particular. So these controversies stem largely from the context of the first half of the 1960s, and especially around the scandal of the German play by Rolf Ockut, the deputy, in 1963, which accused the Pope, Pius XII, of silent complicity in the face of the genocide of the Jews. So the response of Pope Paul VI at that time was twofold. On the one hand, he decided to open the case for the canonization process of Pius XII. But on the other hand, he also entrusted 4 Jesuit historians to select and edit some archival materials from the period of the war, mostly diplomatic documents, which were then published between 1965 and 1981 in the 11 volumes of the Actes et Documents du Saint-Siège relatifs à la Seconde Guerre mondiale. So these documents were important for historians until 2020, but it's a selection, they're not exhaustive. Some documents are cited only partially in the volumes. So it's crucial to go back to the original material source, which is what we can do now since 2020. That's why the opening of 2020 was so important. Also, because in the Acte Document, it's only documents about the Second World War and nothing about the post-war period, the post-Holocaust period, which is now open until 1958. So the new Vatican materials offer a much larger and diverse body of materials and evidence, which allows scholars to write a more nuanced picture of the Vatican position in the face of the Holocaust, confirming in part what the long-term impact of what historian Giovanni Miccoli had coined as the historical memory of the Church, meaning the patterns of thoughts and action of an age-old institution that in part condition its responses, ambivalences, and silence in front of anti-Jewish persecution and in front of the Holocaust. And of course, the longue durée, the legacy of Christian anti-Judaism. And the opening of the archive also shows us that that history cannot be summed up, cannot be reduced to the Pope only, and that's something I try to do. In my own book. So not reducing the picture to just the figure of the Pope, but showing all of the different actors around him, but also in the Vatican diplomacy and beyond that, because what's actually very important, what's actually very new in the Vatican archives, it's not only the diplomatic correspondence, the administration papers, it's also a large number of reports, notably reports by chaplains, military chaplains on the Eastern Front, but also chaplains in civil internment camps, for instance in France and Italy. Testimonies, letters, and photographs sent to the Holy See from organizations and individuals during testifying, bearing witness to the Holocaust and the mass murder of Jews in Eastern and Western Europe. But what I want to show today is, and this is connected to these two offices, it's the thousands of petitions, letters, and nominal files regarding simple individuals, unknown individuals who were victims of anti-Jewish persecutions, and that we can find today in the Vatican archives. So today I will just focus on this type of source, so mostly petitions, letters, nominal files, that help us to bring to light the individual voices of Shoah victims, Jewish refugees, mixed families, and survivors. So this type of documents can be found in both the Vatican Apostolic Archives and notably the different commissions of help, the Commissione Soccorsi, for instance, and also the archives of the Secretary of State, Relation with the State. There's a collection called Ebrei, but it's actually a large part of them are converted or mixed families. So we'll come back to that in a moment. They're so-called non-Aryans. So here I want to focus on a story, history from below, that we can write with the Vatican archives. History also of refugees and exile. And I want to show also that it's a great opportunity for researchers to cross-reference the Vatican archives with other archives on the Holocaust, which I've been trying to do, and I was able to identify and trace the same individuals from the Vatican archives to archives at Yad Vashem, at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, or in the Arolsen archives, for instance. So tracing the full trajectories of individuals in between these different archives. So for the Vatican, the Jews were war victims like any others, and they were especially outside of its own jurisdictions. They were outside of its own ecclesiastical jurisdictions, unless they were baptized. And so that explains why most of the Jews held by the Vatican, a large part of them, were actually converts, Catholics of Jewish origins, and mixed families and intermarried couples. So the intervention of the Vatican was in priority for those persecuted as non-Aryan Catholics, and especially after the 1938 racial laws in Italy, in fascist Italy, which you may know prohibited mixed marriages, for instance. So that explained, for instance, that priority of the Vatican explained the diplomatic agreement in 1939 between Brazil and the Vatican, granting 3,000 Brazilian visas for the immigration of European refugees considered so-called non-Aryan Catholics to Brazil. And so that's something that we can document more now with the new Vatican archives. Brazil stated that only those converted before 1935 were considered eligible for the Brazilian visa, causing the separation of a number of mixed families with different status of conversion, for instance. So eventually only 959 refugees were able to obtain the Brazilian visa, and not all of them were actually able to go to Brazil. So let me show you one case from these different petitions and nominal file. The one of Richard Salzer, which you can see here on the file, is called Cattolico non Ariano. So there are a Jewish Catholic Austrian family refugee in Nice, and the petition consisted in the couple, Richard and Alice, who were both converted in Vienna in 1920, or at least they had a baptismal certificate, and their daughter, Gertrude, who was also baptized on the same day. But in the petition for the Brazilian visa, there was also Richard's twin brother, Oscar, Joseph, who was converted only in 1938. So for that reason, the Vatican did not include Richard's twin brother in the petition to the Brazilian consulate. So and that's his petition in Nice. So here you can see that the couple, Richard and Alice, are included, and Gertrude, their daughter, but not Oscar. And recently I actually found new traces of Oscar also in the Commissione Soccorsi file in the Vatican, this time in 1942, 1943. He feared the German invasion of the south of France and asked the Vatican to help him to move to Italy. And he's described in the Vatican document as a Catholic, but of non-Aryan race, formerly Jewish, so cattolico però di razza non ariana, ossia ex-ebreo, in December 42. And then I lost the trace of Oscar Salzer. So for now, I don't know what happened to him. Instead, for the rest of the family, it was an actual odyssey to go to Brazil, because their fate met the refugees of the Alsina, who went there, embarked. It's a long story, but you can see here different stages of that real odyssey. And when the boat actually arrived in Rio de Janeiro in October 1941, the Brazilian authorities refused to allow the refugees of Jewish origins, so Jews and Jewish converts alike. 95 of them were not allowed to disembark because the Brazilian authorities consider them Semitic and non-assimilable. So the non-Aryan Catholics suffer the same fate as the Jews in religion. And that's something that the Vatican Archive showed very clearly. Eventually, they were accepted by those Jewish refugees and of Jewish origins were accepted by the Dutch colony of Curaçao. And I found here the trace of the Salzer family. They were helped by Jewish organizations, actually, the Joint Distribution Committee. So I found the trace in the Yad Vashem archives, and I know that they were allowed to move to the US in 1942. So it is worth noting that Brazilian authorities were not the only one to see these refugees, these non-Aryan Catholics with an anti-Jewish lens. Also, some members of the Curia, or members of the Vatican, casted suspicion on these refugees and saw them with old tropes. So for instance, Monsignor Armando Lombardi, in an internal report of 1940, who said, "We see that in 19th centuries, the race has become worse. The church is quite right to qualify them as she does on Good Friday, meaning perfidious. But precisely for this reason, the work of paternal charity undertaken by the Holy Father in their favor is sublime and heroic." And so here he's talking about specifically non-Aryan Catholic refugees going to Brazil. And that's one example, but also Tardini, for instance, had the same kind of judgment. But I'm going to skip that. Oops, too much. I wanted to talk about, so I talk about experience of migration. I would like to talk about experience of internment, because many petitions received by the Vatican were sent by Jews or Catholics of Jewish origins who were interned, especially by the fascist regime after June 1940. So one example I found is actually in the Archivio Centrale dello Stato about the Jewish population census of Milan. And I found a family, Benjamin Bank, who was born in 1937 in Milan, the son of Ersch Bank and Carlotta Kurkowski. You can see it here from the Jewish population census. And in the Vatican archives then, in the second time, I found a petition sent by the mother, Charlotte Kurkowski Bank, to the Vatican in November 1941 on behalf of her husband, Hersch Bank, was born in Poland. And here you can see the petition that she sent to the Vatican. She wrote it in German. So my husband, born in Poland, is of Jewish race, but he was baptized. We were married as Catholics. I'm Aryan and Catholic. Our two young children, aged 4 and 6, were both baptized. And so she asked, her husband was interned in the camp, the fascist camp of Ferramonti di Tarsia in Calabria, which was the largest fascist internment camp at that time. So her husband was interned in the south in Calabria, and she asked the Vatican to help to have him transferred to the north, where she was living, next to Milano. But the petition was, the request was pending, and then Ersch Bank wrote again to the Vatican 2 years after, in 1942. And this time he sent his petition asking help to contribute to the Catholic education of his children. Sorry, that's what he's saying. I want to obtain my transfer to Ceso Maggiore, which is next to Belluno, to ensure the future of my children and to educate them in the same Christian faith as myself. So that's the petition, and this time his request was granted. And the Ministry of Interior, with the support of the nuncio, with the support of the Vatican, authorized Ersch to move back to the north in October 1942. So you may know, and that's the cruel irony of this situation, is that a year later, Ferramonti di Tarsia was liberated by the Allies. The south of Italy was liberated, while the north was invaded. And in fact, I found then traces of Ersch Bank in the database of Holocaust victims in Italy at Yad Vashem and on the CEDEC. That shows that he was still located in Ceso Maggiore, so in Veneto, in November 1943, but then he was arrested, sent to the Fossoli transit camp, and then deported to Auschwitz by the convoy of February 1944. And he did not survive. He did not return from Auschwitz. So I was able to find that cross-referencing these different archives, the Vatican archives, Yad Vashem, the CEDEC. And the CEDEC also includes some family pictures. of the second daughter of the family, Carmen Bank. And here you can see a picture of Ersch Bank with his children. I think this is back from internment, so probably in the summer of 1943. Going back to Ferramonti di Tarsia, that internment camp in the south of Italy, the Vatican had appointed a chaplain, Father Calice Lopino, a Capuchin, and who was very active in helping Jews, but also trying to convert them. So he documented a certain number of conversions. Among them, Joseph Pront. Second case I'm going to show here. Joseph Pront is of Polish origin, Polish Jew, who moved to Gorizia in Friuli already in 1920, and he was living there. But he was interned at Ferramonti in September 1940 as a foreigner, as a stateless Jew. And I was able to find also in the joint archives, in the GDC archive, that he was still in the camp after the liberation. He stayed a long time there. Now, I found his petition in the Vatican archives. If that works, yeah. He sent a petition to the Vatican archives just a month after being sent to Ferramonti. He asked for the authorization to be able to marry his partner, to be able to marry in a Catholic way. He said for 13 years, talking about himself, has been in a relationship with a war widow, Italian Aryan, who had a small child of 6 years old, to whose education he contributed, blah, blah. So he would like to be able to marry that Italian Aryan woman, but the Vatican did not grant that permission. And I found another petition of Bren, this time in the archives of the Jewish community of Rome, that he sent to the De La Seme, February and March 1945. He's still in Ferramonti, and he wants to return to Judaism. So he sent a petition saying, I'm a Polish Jew. 2 years ago, I wanted to immigrate to Brazil. And so here we have a motivation why he did convert. And he said, Diane, I want to return to my born religion. I am Jewish. In my heart, I never changed my faith. I can no longer be even formally non-Jewish. So I wrote to you to send permission that I can take here in the camp the ritual bath, the mikveh. And it's interesting so that's from the Jewish community in Rome archives, interesting to see the answer of the Jewish community that said that in March 1945, if there is a possibility of ritual bathing according to the norms and in presence of 2 valid witnesses, one can certainly proceed with the ceremony of returning to Judaism. So here we see, tracing the same person in different archives, the change of confession, returning then to Judaism. He doesn't mention his Italian partner in this letter, just his family in Poland that he would like to go back to. And I will take one last example about the post-war period. As I said, the Vatican archives allow us to show, to look both the period of the war and the post-war period. I had one example on Brazil again, but I will skip it to go directly to Haifa, 1951. A petition I found also in the Vatican archives. This time a petition by a woman, Catholic Polish, Alexandra Jonisz, a petition that she sent to the Vatican representative in Jerusalem. She explained that she first married a Catholic Paul in 1937, and they had a first daughter, Madeleine, born in 1940. Her husband died in 1942. After the war, in 1946, still in Poland, she married a Polish Jew named Józef Jonisz. So a mixed couple, and that was a civil marriage. And I found the trace of Józef Jonisz in documents from the Arosen, the International Tracing Service archives, at Yad Vashem in particular. And I found that his experience during the war, he survived Auschwitz. And then the couple migrated to Palestine or Israel in 1947, 1948. It's not very clear. And they had 2 other children. I mean, they had 2 children together, Mark and Miriam. But so the woman sent a petition in 1951 from Haifa to the representative of the Pope of the Vatican in Jerusalem, because her husband abandoned her, apparently, and went to a kibbutz, taking the boy with him and abandoning her with the little Miriam, so the 2 daughters, actually. So a case here of separation, of abandonment. And what's interesting is that the internal report by the Vatican representative in Jerusalem stress out the bad impression made by the woman. He says she's shady. But also the main important problem was that the daughter, Miriam, who was born in 1948, was not baptized, or she was baptized only in August 1951. So that's what the report actually stress out. So it's important because, as you know, it's also a context when post-war migration to Palestine and Israel was an issue of contention for the Vatican and between the Vatican and Jewish organization. The Vatican strongly opposed Jewish migration and the creation of the State of Israel. But what's important in these internal reports is that there are still a form of anti-traditional, anti-Judaism and anti-Jewish prejudices still present in this case. So just to conclude very, very quickly on these different cases that I showed you, I think one of my main takeaways from doing research in the Vatican archives is like the painting of Felix Nussbaum, the refugee. It's both a global and micro history of Shoah, of the Shoah victims and refugees and survivors that we can write from these documents, based on these documents, mainly showing the a truly global and transnational perspective, bringing together examples from multiple countries and non-state actors, but also the voice of the victims themselves, their agency, actually, how they try to also reach different organizations in different periods, presenting themselves also differently. That's actually interesting. And so bringing to light these thousands of petitions, letters, individual voices. And again, I think one of the richness also of the Vatican archives is to try then to cross-reference them with other archives, and especially the one in Washington and Jerusalem. So, thank you very much.
Well, Nina has the distinction of giving a paper at the moment that we have a new pope. More power to you for making it through that. And I love the point that you made that we talked about just a little bit this morning of how important it is to take different archives and the ability to efficiently look at them together to create a better and more holistic picture. And our final speaker is Dr. Rocco Giansante, who works in the acquisitions department of Yad Vashem's archives. He studied in Parma, Lisbon, and London before earning a PhD in film studies from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Over the course of his academic career, Rocco has published articles and book chapters on topics including Italian cinema, transnational Israeli cinema, and the work of filmmakers Paolo Roca and Steven Spielberg. His co-edited volume, Imagined Israels, produced with Luna Goldberg, was published by Brill in March 2023. This book critically explores representations of the Jewish state in the arts.
Okay. Hello. Thank you, Susan, for these kind words, and also thank you for this invitation. And it's been a very thought-provoking morning and afternoon, and I'm honored to be part of this conversation. And I thought it was going to be a very hard act to follow Nina's presentation and Rabbi Meyer's presentation and Professor Sarfati's, but now it's even more difficult because history is happening outside the walls of this institution. So yeah, please have pity on me. So what I'm going to do, okay, cool. What I'm going to do today with you is to reflect together on this intersection or the encounter between digital technologies and the Holocaust, and specifically what it does to Holocaust memory, and but also what can we do in terms of education, commemoration, and even historical research when using digital technologies. So before I start, I just want to give a caveat in the sense that I'm mildly optimistic about this encounter between the digital realm and Holocaust, and so I will focus in my presentation on the good things that we can get out of it, and then maybe in the Q&A we can talk about all the challenges and the difficult situations that arise when these two dimensions come together. And yeah, I want to be positive. So I'm going to start with a quote by William Kahnsteiner, who writes, "The cosmopolitan Holocaust memory of the new millennium is synonymous with digital technology." So this is very clear. That's why we are here today to discuss digital technologies. So in this quote, there are two elements that I want to highlight. One is cosmopolitan Holocaust memory. So we've talked about a little bit about this in the morning, but yes, Holocaust memory is today a global, has a global dimension. The Holocaust is not just the memory of the people living in the spaces of the Holocaust, but it has become something global. It has become something global for many reasons, but we could say in a nutshell, because the Shoah is today, for most people, a metaphor about contemporary existence. So the Shoah is referenced in all sorts of situations, in all sorts of contexts, and one reason for this is the role of digital technologies. Digital technologies that make information and memories and stories more easy to share in a vast space. But when we look at digital technologies, we shouldn't just see them as channels to convey information, as simple media, but also as something that affects memory in an ontological way, the essence of memory. What I mean is that digital technologies shape the way we create memory. They shape the way we, in our case, we imagine the Shoah, we visualize the Shoah, and so we understand the Shoah. So the reflecting on digital technologies, it's fundamental. Something else that also I would like to highlight is the fact that with the digital world in which we live in, and we have to also consider that there is a new, or there is a digital memory culture, meaning that until a few years ago, there was one way of making memory. In a sense, there was the memory of institutions, the memory of states, the memory of transnational organizations, but there was one central memory that people could accept or refuse. There wasn't a middle way. Now, today, thanks to digital technology, we can all create our own memory. There's a sort of democratization of the construction of memory process. Everyone can build their own memory, and anyone can really construct their memory. And this memory is sometimes antagonistic. This memory sometimes goes against the institutional memory, but sometimes this memory completes or gives a new understanding of past memories. And this, I don't know if we talked about today the role of Auschwitz and how much Auschwitz takes over the memory of the Shoah. And then thanks to also digital technologies, we can actually tell other stories. We can actually go and explore other memories. So we have this new memory which is strictly connected to the digital realm, and this memory is also characterized by fluidity, by virality, by velocity. There are elements that characterize the memory that we didn't have in the analog time in the years before the creation, the advent of digital technologies. So I want to bring here a few examples about this digital technology, and but what I want to do is to look at these technologies by going beyond the paradigm of representation, meaning that when we discuss Holocaust-related images on YouTube or on Instagram or on TikTok, these images get a lot of bad press. A lot of intellectuals and journalists, they say, this is disrespectful, this is not right. Yeah. Especially when these images are made by young people. The critics say, young people don't know the meaning of the place where they are. Taking a selfie in Auschwitz is disrespectful. And so I want to look at these documents, these products, not through the content, but through what the technology can give us, what the technology can afford the users. So for example, if we look at photographs in Instagram, to look at the photos not in terms of what they're showing, so the indexicality of the photo, but in terms of communication. If you take a picture and you post it on Instagram, the most important aspect of this operation is the fact that you want to share the picture. It's less, you don't take a picture for Instagram because you want to put it in your living room and observe it. You want to share it. You want to share it with your friends. Sometimes you want to share it with also people that you don't know. But there is this aspect of communication that is embedded in these operations, in these digital moments. So the selfie or even photographs of places, of spaces of other people, they can be seen as gestures of media sociability, meaning the photograph is a way for us, and in this case on Instagram, it's a way for us to communicate emotions, for example, to communicate something that we're feeling. So by taking pictures, for example, in a space like Auschwitz or in another place of memory, what we have to see here, it's an operation of transmission. It's a way for me to communicate what I'm feeling in a specific during a specific moment. And for example, if you see here in this slide, the famous entrance in Auschwitz with all these filters, and sometimes if we look at these this ensemble of pictures, we can think, this is just people, young people, or just playing around with filters and trying to be cool. And well, maybe we should see this in a different way. We should see people trying to connect to their memorial visuals of Auschwitz. So, for example, I've seen Auschwitz in films, I've seen Auschwitz in photographs, in books, and by applying those filters, that black and white filter, that vintage filter, I'm trying to connect to that memory and trying to connect to those processes of visualization. And so what I'm doing here, it's also continuing a process of memorialization. Instagram, it's also videos, so with the stories, and here I'm just bringing. I'm sure many of you know this series, the Eva Stories, that was created on Instagram, and it's basically the story of this young Jewish girl called Eva Ayman. She lived in Budapest, and she was persecuted and then deported, and then she was killed in the Shoah. And it was this company in Israel imagined a new way to commemorate Holocaust victims, a new way that was more in tune with the sensitivity of young people, because they realized that young people don't really connect with like traditional, let's say, rituals and ceremonies. And so the idea behind this series is to imagine what would a girl during the Shoah do if she had a telephone, a portable telephone. So we see the story of this woman taking selfies and filming the tragic reality of her family and of herself. Now, this product received a lot of bad press, and a lot of people saying, no, this is not appropriate, this is horrible, this is what we don't play around with the Shoah. But if we look beyond the paradigm of representation, and we see what this tool can afford, then we see some positive things that can be used, for example, in an educational setting, positive things that can be used in commemoration. So the space on Instagram allows for a responsive moment. You can write in the comments, you can share, you can actually, it demands your participation, it demands your reaction. The user becomes a media witness, meaning a witness of something seen through media, not a direct witness, but again, still a witness. So you can that story becomes something that then you can report, that you can tell, that you can share, that you can. It becomes yours. And there is also this very interesting multimodal storytelling technique that puts the accent on the people, on the users, and the users are asked to build, together with the creator, the memory or the story. And this is something that it's very important. In the morning we talked about the era of the witness, and what we're living today is the era of the user, meaning it's the memory, but also the storytelling, if you allow me, the recounting of the events of the Shoah, and in this case, it's done also by the users. It's done with the participation of the users. And if sometimes this can be problematic because truths can be manipulated, because inaccuracies can happen, at the same time, there is a value in the activation of people and in the construction of a memory. For example, on another platform like TikTok, this is also very evident because TikTok allows, for example, the split screen function or the stitch function. So it allows us, first of all, to create dialogue. to create community, to create a diffusion of narratives, and also it demands creativity from the users, and it demands thinking, it demands engagement when telling a story. And all these, okay, and for example, even survivors use digital media to tell their stories. And this is something that I find very powerful. The survivor himself takes, or herself, they take the photo, they take the camera, and in their house, in a moment when they want, they decide to give their testimony, to tell a story. It's not anymore this situation where the survivor would be invited in a cultural center or in a school, and he would sit in front of a classroom, and he would go through the story, and in a very formal and stylized way. This is quick. This is short. This is creative, and this allows. Again, communication. There is the possibility for people to commenting and to share and reaction, and the memory becomes then this moment of this dialogue then becomes a memory, and it's a memory that it's built together. It's not anymore a passive audience that stands or that sits in front of a narrative, but it's something. It's a story that it's built together. And if we look at AR, for example, augmented reality, so like in this case, the possibility of completing a post-Holocaust landscape. So this is also something that digital technologies allow us to discover the memory that it's lying or it's hidden in places. And I think this is very powerful. This is fascinating, even where there aren't any documents, even when there aren't any constructions, there aren't any barracks left. Through augmented reality, here we can evoke what has been destructed. We can evoke the memory that was lost. That probably without this possibility of reconstructing in a digital way, we wouldn't be able to, or it would require a lot of work on the part of people, and maybe only some historians would be able to do it. But here, thanks to a simple iPad, I can open up dimensions of memory. And another example is what people call the holograms, but it's in reality interactive biographies, and there are all sorts of reactions to this enterprise, and everyone is. I mean, I'm not going to enter into why it's good, why it's bad, but what it really allows, I think, it's for people to connect with Holocaust testimonies. It's not about here the survivor telling a story, but it's creating a platform that allows people to look at to listen to a testimony. So while we would think that maybe a 2-hour video it's too long to watch, or maybe it's too boring, or maybe people don't have any more the patience to look at it, this digital tool then allows us to look into the testimony And again, the accent is on the user. It's us, we ask the hologram questions. We ask the hologram to talk, and it's not anymore the survivor that decides to tell the story. So it's a way to engage with a text. And the same thing with VR. We've listened to this morning to those very touching testimonies of the visit of the students in Auschwitz, and but not everyone can travel to Auschwitz, and students living, for example, in very outside of Europe, it becomes very expensive and very complicated to visit certain places. And here, thanks to VR, we can travel to places, we can go to places. Of course, it's not the same thing, but it is something that can be helpful to get near to that experience. And so, going towards the conclusion, if we're thinking about like digital technologies and how can they be used in education and or in research, maybe in order to better understand this question, we should go back to the fundamental one, which is why are we here today talking about the Shoah? Why it's important to study the Shoah, to remember the Shoah, to do research, and I think if we ask this question to anyone here in this room, each one will give an answer. So I've created like my list. I'm sure you all have your own, but let's see if this works. So for me, one of the main reasons is the dimension of the event. We're talking about an event that touched millions of people and took place at a transnational dimension, took place in many different places of the planet, not just in Europe, but also in other continents. So there is this dimension in terms of quantity, in terms of numbers, that it's huge. There aren't many other historical events that have such a dimension. Then the documentation. We have millions and millions of pages of documentation of perpetrators, documentation of the Jewish victims. This documentation needs to be studied, needs to be researched. It's an ethical. We have the moral duty to look at this documentation. And then from words to facts, I didn't know how else to formulate this, but the Shoah, it's a very powerful example that shows us how it's very easy, or how important words are, and how we cannot dismiss slogans and violent speeches, because these violent words, violent communication, slogans can really then bring us to very tragic situations. And then the question of never again, we always use it, we talk about it, but what does it mean? And this is something that we're always confronted with, and we need to understand. And the human dimension. The human dimension, the Shoah, it was said by here by Professor Sarfati, the Shoah is not something that God created. It's not something it's not a punishment, a divine punishment. The Shoah is a human event. It was something that a human group made to other groups, and it's a story that tells us about the human spirit, the human condition, and so this it's another element that I think it's important. Now, all these reasons, okay, I would add to these reasons another quote. From Professor Yehuda Bauer, who passed away relatively recently, who wrote that when you teach the Holocaust, you have to start from the core, from the text, before you can approach the context. Now, this is, I think it's a very important message, or a very important quote, because we tend to, especially in public discourse, to use the Shoah in order to give moral lessons, in order to comment on situations. And Yehuda Bauer says, okay, you want to use the Shoah, you want to reference the Shoah, you want to bring the Shoah into the conversation, but then first study the Shoah, first try to understand what it was. It's a return to history. First study the text, and then we can decide what the text means to me, and what kind of resolutions it allows me to take. So if we bring all these elements together, then I think that digital technologies, in a very brief, in a nutshell, what they can give us is the possibility of capturing the complexities of the Holocaust. The Holocaust is an extremely complex event. There are many stories that still need to be discovered. There are many places in all sorts of countries with many languages. Anyone who has been researching the Holocaust, who's been in an archive, knows how complex is this situation. Also, the dynamics between perpetrators and victims and stand-byers, it's a lot to take in, and digital technologies allow us, in a way, to deal with this complexity. Why? First of all, because it allows more people to access historical sources. We're involved in this huge campaign of digitizing documents and putting them online, and this is possible only because of digital technologies. Digital technologies allow students, allow researchers, allow lay people to access documents that in another situation would be very difficult to access, because you would need to go to the local archive or even to the big city to visit the archives and to spend hours and finding documents. Thanks to the digital, we can go to those documents. We can find those traces. We can read those pages. So it's very important, this idea of digitizing and making documents available. The digital documents, or AI, for example, they help us to better understand and explain those same documents. It's much easier today to copy paste the text on Google Translate, for example, or to use all sorts of tools to better understand the document. Even, for example, if we consider the huge amount of oral testimonies that we have about the Holocaust, and how many years an entire lifetime wouldn't be enough for a single individual to listen to all those stories. Here, thanks to big data and the possibilities of AI to manage a huge amount of information, we can actually listen to all these testimonies. We can at least capture a sense of all these stories. We can find we can search by words, by places. We can deconstruct these testimonies, and we can listen to these stories that sometimes are just buried in the archives and cannot be discovered. And then digital technologies allow us to look at the macro, but also at the micro. This was also possible before, but it's even more easier now to zoom in and out, to go from the huge stories and also to focus on very small details. And the digital technologies allow to personalize our experience as learners, and so the story becomes engaging for you because it speaks to you directly. Now, this, of course, creates issues, but it can be seen as a starting point, as a starting point in a learning process, as a starting point in a research process. I see something that speaks to me. I see something that I like. I see something that it's important to me, and that allows me then to be engaged in the bigger picture, and at the same time, when thinking about personalizing commemoration, why not? The personalization of commemoration renders the commemoration more strong and effective. So these are just some ideas that I wanted to share with you. And of course, it's not all pink. And I know that I'm not discussing the problems, but I really, because it's very easy to discount this technology and to condemn it, I really wanted to highlight what I think are some very positive developments. Thank you very much.